It was a normal Friday evening. I was 23, traveling alone for work, and had just checked into a small hotel in downtown Chicago. The lobby smelled faintly of cleaning solution, and the fluorescent lights hummed softly above. Everything felt ordinary. The front desk clerk gave me a polite smile, handed me my key card, and waved me toward the elevator. I thought about ordering room service, maybe catching a movie on TV, and then sleeping early to be ready for a meeting the next morning. Nothing unusual at all. The hallway outside my room was quiet. The beige carpet muffled my footsteps as I dragged my small suitcase behind me. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and dropped my bag near the bed. The room was standard: a king-sized bed, a small desk, a lamp in the corner, and a mini fridge humming quietly. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting out a long sigh. It had been a long day of flights, trains, and meetings. The city lights outside filtered faintly through the curtains. I was about to reach for my phone when I heard it, the first knock on my door. It was soft, deliberate. I froze. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe housekeeping, maybe another guest. The sound didn't fit the rhythm of the empty hotel. There was no one in the hallway. I stood up and approached the door, holding my key card. The knocking stopped as soon as I got closer. My stomach tightened. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just the building settling. I told myself that hotels often creak at night, that maybe someone had simply knocked on the wrong door. I looked around my room, counting the small details: the lamp, the bed, the mini fridge, the telephone on the desk. Everything was normal. Nothing looked out of place. But still, the air felt heavy. My skin prickled, a subtle but unmistakable warning I couldn't ignore. I checked the peephole. Nothing. Just the dimly lit hallway, completely empty. No one. The shadows cast by the lights seemed slightly off, stretching a little too long, moving in ways they shouldn't. I laughed nervously at myself. I was tired. Overthinking. That had to be it. But then I noticed something, on the floor across the hall, in the corner just out of reach of the light, a small dark shape. I couldn't tell what it was. I squinted, holding my breath. When I blinked, it was gone. That's when the fear began to creep in. A normal night, a normal hotel room, a normal solo trip, but something wasn't right. I didn't know who, or what, was out there, and that uncertainty made every second feel longer. My hands were shaking slightly as I gripped the door handle. Everything seemed fine, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That someone was waiting, watching, patient. And I had no idea when, or if, they would make their move. The hotel I was staying at was one of those older, quiet buildings that felt like it hadn't changed much in decades. The walls were painted a dull beige, the carpet in the hallway soft but worn in the middle where everyone walked. The elevator had a faint metallic smell, and its doors closed with a slow, hesitant groan. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was clean, affordable, and close to my meeting location in the morning. It was late evening when I arrived. The city outside had started to calm down, streets quieter than during the afternoon rush, occasional cars passing by with headlights cutting through the darkness. A storm was rolling in somewhere in the distance. I could hear faint thunder rumbling against the buildings. The low hum of the air conditioning inside the hotel was the only constant sound. I had been traveling for most of the day and was exhausted. All I wanted was a shower and to crawl into bed. I had chosen this hotel because it was convenient, close to the office where I had an early presentation. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. The front desk clerk, a middle-aged man with a friendly but tired expression, gave me my key card and a brief rundown of breakfast hours. "If you need anything else, just call," he said. I nodded and smiled politely, carrying my bag toward the elevator. Everything seemed normal, just a typical business trip. After unpacking, I set my phone on the desk and plugged in my charger. The room smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and old wood polish, the faintest trace of cigarette smoke lingering in the corners. The bedspread was neatly tucked, the sheets smooth, and the small desk had a phone and a hotel information booklet. I opened the curtains slightly to see the city lights. Neon signs flickered in the distance, and wet streets reflected them after an earlier rain. Outside, The occasional siren or car horn reminded me that life went on, oblivious to whatever might happen inside these walls. I wasn't entirely alone. A few other guests were staying in the hotel, I assumed, hearing distant voices in the hallways, the faint slamming of a door. One of them could have been a family with kids, judging by the muffled laughter I heard on the first floor. I didn't meet anyone directly, and that was fine. I liked quiet, especially after traveling all day. The normalcy of other people living their lives in the same building, their routines separate from mine, made the environment feel safe. I checked the clock. It was just after 10 p.m. The storm was closer now, occasional gusts rattling the windows. I poured myself a glass of water from the mini fridge and sat at the edge of the bed, trying to relax. Nothing felt out of place. Everything seemed normal. But the small sense of unease from earlier, the knock, the fleeting shadow in the hallway, still lingered in the back of my mind. I told myself it was probably nothing. Hotels had creaks, drafts, and old wiring that could flicker lights unexpectedly. I was just tired, that was all. Little did I know, that ordinary evening in this ordinary hotel was about to change completely. A series of small, subtle events would slowly escalate, leading me to realize that what I assumed was normal might not be so safe after all. After settling in, I tried to focus on my laptop for a while, answering emails and preparing for the next day. The hum of the air conditioner and the occasional flicker of the hallway lights created a steady background rhythm. Everything seemed normal, and I tried to convince myself that the earlier knock on my door had been nothing, probably a staff member checking on a maintenance issue, or a neighbor accidentally knocking on the wrong door. But then I noticed a subtle sound I hadn't paid attention to before. A soft scraping, like shoes dragging lightly across carpet, coming from somewhere outside my door. I paused, listening. It stopped. I waited a few seconds, holding my breath, but the hallway remained empty. I shrugged it off and went back to my emails, but my heart was racing a little faster than usual. A few minutes later, I heard it again. A whisper of movement, almost imperceptible, accompanied by the faintest click, like someone was testing the door handle. I froze, staring at the door. The hallway outside was dimly lit by the flickering overhead bulbs. Shadows stretched along the walls in uneven shapes. I tried to tell myself it was just the building settling, or maybe the storm causing drafts to make doors sway. But the sound didn't come from the door moving, it came from someone or something moving on the carpet. I moved closer to the peephole, my hand shaking slightly. Nothing. Just the long corridor, empty except for the shadows. But my stomach sank when I noticed a faint outline against the wall at the far end of the hall. I couldn't tell if it was a coat hanging on a rack or a person standing still, but my eyes kept returning to it. Every time I blinked, it seemed to shift, subtly, almost as if it were breathing. Then came another sound, soft, deliberate footsteps, echoing faintly, slow and measured. I held my breath, pressing my back against the wall. The footsteps stopped just short of my door. A pause, then a barely audible scraping sound, like nails brushing the carpet. My pulse was thundering in my ears. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that hotels sometimes had noises at night. But the combination, the shadow, the footsteps, the scraping, made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't ignore. I glanced at the phone on my desk, debating whether to call the front desk. My hands trembled as I reached for it, but then I heard it, a soft, uneven breathing from the hallway. I froze completely. The sound was deliberate, too slow to be casual, too close to be another guest. I realized, with a creeping sense of dread, that someone or something was out there, waiting, just beyond my door. For the next few minutes, I stayed completely still, listening. Every minor sound, the hum of the AC, the distant siren outside, the faint patter of rain on the windows, suddenly felt amplified. The ordinary hotel room that had seemed safe just hours ago now felt small, confined, and fragile. That calm, normal evening was slowly slipping into something else. Something I didn't understand yet, but that would become impossible to ignore. I thought the sounds outside my door had stopped, but I was wrong. After a few tense minutes of silence, there was a soft knock again, this time sharper, almost urgent. My stomach sank. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear anything. There was breathing, low and deliberate, and the faintest shuffle of feet moving back and forth. Whoever or whatever it was, they were testing me, trying to gauge if I was alone. I considered calling the front desk again, but my hands were shaking too badly to dial. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, but I was rooted to the spot, trying to listen, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. The hallway was empty when I had looked earlier, but now I could feel it. Someone had moved closer. Shadows in the corridor seemed darker, the dim light flickering across the walls like a heartbeat. Then I heard the scrape again. It was coming from just outside my door now. Slowly, deliberately, as if someone was pacing. My chest tightened. I realized the hotel room door, the one I had thought of as a barrier between safety and the unknown, felt thin, fragile, almost meaningless. The sound of breathing, heavier now, closer, pressed against my nerves. I felt completely trapped. Every exit from the room, the window, the hallway, the elevator, suddenly seemed far away and unreliable. I crouched near the bed, trying to make myself small, invisible, listening as the footsteps paused. Then a sudden knock, hard this time, rattled the door handle. My pulse spiked. Whoever it was, they weren't planning on leaving. My mind raced. Was it a thief? Someone who had been watching me all day? Or something worse? I looked around the room for anything I could use, a chair, a heavy lamp, but my hands were trembling so badly I could barely lift the lamp. The knocking continued, now paired with a low, almost imperceptible whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like my name. Room 314, it seemed to hiss. My stomach turned, and I realized this wasn't random. Someone had targeted me. I moved toward the bathroom, thinking I could hide or barricade myself. Every step felt loud in the otherwise silent room. I pressed my back against the wall, my ear to the door, and could hear movement just beyond it. The scraping of shoes, the faint tap of a hand on the wood. Whoever it was had circled around, testing, waiting for me to make a mistake. The storm outside added to the tension. Thunder rumbled, shaking the windows, masking small noises, but inside, the danger was immediate and precise. I felt utterly exposed. The hotel that had seemed normal, safe, and routine just hours ago was now a trap. I was alone, and there was someone outside my door, closer than I had ever imagined, and entirely unafraid. Every instinct told me to run, but I couldn't. I was frozen by the sound of breathing, by the deliberate, slow movement of someone closing in. The ordinary hotel room had transformed into a place where every shadow, every flicker of light, every soft noise carried a real threat. I knew the person was real. I knew they were here. And I knew there was nowhere to hide. The knocking turned into a sharp, aggressive pounding on the door. My heart was racing so fast, I thought it would explode. I grabbed the lamp from the desk and pressed myself into the corner, trying to make myself small, hoping that whoever it was might leave. But the pounding continued, now paired with muffled scraping sounds, like someone trying to force the door open. I edged toward the bathroom, planning to hide inside. The hallway outside my door was dark, and I could hear the low, deliberate breathing of the person on the other side. Every second stretched impossibly long. I pressed the door handle, but it didn't lock any tighter than before. Whoever it was could easily push it open if they tried hard enough. I felt trapped, completely exposed, with no idea what they wanted or how dangerous they were. Then the voice came, soft, low, and calm, but unmistakably human. Room 314, it said, dragging the words like a warning. My stomach sank. This wasn't random. They knew I was here. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to think. I needed to act fast. I darted to the bedroom closet, hoping I could barricade myself with the coat rack and hangers. The pounding on the door escalated, accompanied by the sound of a lock sliding on an adjacent room, someone moving around outside, searching. My hands shook violently as I crouched in the dark, trying not to make a sound. My ears picked up every detail, the creak of the hinges in, The hallway, the faint whisper of shoes against the carpet, the occasional click of something metal. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled violently. My breath caught in my throat. I ducked lower. The door handle twisted again. Whoever it was trying to force their way in. I pressed myself further into the corner, holding the lamp like a shield. My mind raced through every possible escape route. The window, the hallway, calling the front desk, but I couldn't risk making any noise. Then, a moment of movement in the hallway caught my eye through the small gap under the door. A shadow passed. My pulse jumped. I saw a glimpse of a figure crouched low, almost blending with the darkness. It was then I realized they had been observing me, waiting for the right moment to make a move. I could see their hand, pale, moving toward the knob again. Adrenaline took over. I sprinted to the door and slammed my shoulder against it, pushing it hard. It budged slightly, enough for me to squeeze past and run into the stairwell. I stumbled down the stairs 2 at a time, hearing the person behind me, their footsteps heavier now, chasing. I reached the lobby and yanked the front door open, letting the storm outside hit me in the face. Rain drenched me instantly, but I didn't stop. I ran to the street, waving down a passing car, shouting for help. The police arrived minutes later. I pointed back at the hotel, breathless, soaked, and shaking. They entered the building, and I could see them coming back with a man in handcuffs. He was silent, expressionless, carrying something small in his coat pocket. The adrenaline was still coursing through me, but I finally felt safe, or as safe as I could after what had just happened. I thought the moment the police had the man in handcuffs was over, that I could finally breathe. But what they told me next made my stomach drop in a way nothing else had that night. As it turned out, the man had been hiding inside the hotel for hours before I even arrived. Not just in one room, but moving quietly between empty rooms, listening, watching. He had planned it carefully, studying the building, the staff, the guests. The police explained that he had been staying in a nearby abandoned room on the same floor. That was where he had waited, completely out of sight, until he knew someone, a solo guest, was alone. That was me. Every sound I had heard, the soft scraping, the deliberate breathing, the faint whisper of my name, was him testing me, observing my reactions, planning his move. The realization hit me hard. Every subtle sign of unease I'd felt that night wasn't my imagination. It had been real. But the twist that made it even worse was what they found when they searched his coat pockets. There was a small pocket knife, one that matched the faint glint I had caught under the door earlier, and a notebook. In it, he had written observations about guests in the hotel, detailed notes about their habits, and, chillingly, a page labeled Room 314. My name was scribbled there. He had been planning this for a long time. I had been chosen, targeted, and his approach had been deliberate, almost clinical. The police told me that he had a record of stalking and that he had been moving from hotel to hotel in the area, watching, waiting for the right moment. He wasn't some random intruder. He had studied me without my knowledge, using the quiet, empty hallways as his hunting ground. Everything I had experienced that night, the knocking, the shadow, the footsteps, had been orchestrated. The ordinary hotel room that felt safe, the storm outside, the empty corridors, they had all been part of his plan. I couldn't stop thinking about the quiet moments before the confrontation, the small noises, the shadow under the door. He had been there hiding, observing every single time. And I had never seen him. I had been completely exposed, entirely at his mercy, without even realizing it. Even after the police had taken him away, I couldn't shake the realization. The danger had been much closer, much more personal than I could have imagined. The calm, routine hotel environment, the ordinary evening, had been a trap. And if it hadn't been for my instinct to run, to hide, to fight, I don't know what would have happened. It was a sharp, sudden understanding. The night hadn't just been scary, it had been calculated. The subtle tension, the quiet fear, the small sounds I thought were nothing, they were all signs of a predator who had been planning to act the moment I was most vulnerable. That was the part that left me shaken the most. Everything had been real, every detail intentional, every second of fear designed to make me helpless. Even after the man was taken away, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadow of him standing outside my door, just beyond the peephole. The hotel room, which had seemed ordinary and safe hours earlier, now felt small and suffocating. I kept imagining the faint scraping of shoes, the low, deliberate breathing, and the way he had moved with such careful patience. It wasn't just the memory of the night, it was the knowledge that someone had been that close, watching me without my knowledge. I checked into another hotel the next week. The room was newer, the floors polished, the corridors brightly lit. And yet, I felt the same tightness in my chest. Every knock, every creak, every flicker of light made me tense. I found myself double-checking the locks, peeking through the peephole, and listening for the slightest movement outside my door. It was exhausting, but I couldn't stop. The memory of that night had changed the way I viewed even the most ordinary spaces. The police said the man had been caught and would be facing charges, but something about it didn't feel complete. There was a lingering uncertainty in the way they spoke, the way they described him. They didn't know everything he had planned, where he had been before or after my room, or if he had left notes or items in other rooms. The thought that some part of his plan might have gone unnoticed gnawed at me. Even now, months later, I feel it sometimes. When I travel, when I stay in a quiet hotel, there's a part of me that tightens as soon as I walk down a dimly lit hallway. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I imagine a shadow just outside my door, waiting, patient, watching. I tell myself it's just anxiety, just a leftover memory. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like he or someone like him could still be out there, following the same method, watching, waiting for the next target. I've never returned to that hotel. I've driven past it a few times, seeing the lights still on in the same windows, the same narrow hallways I had walked down. I keep thinking about how easy it had been for him to move undetected, how close he had been. If it had been a different night, or if I had been less alert, I don't want to imagine what might have happened. Sometimes I wonder if he's still thinking about me, still planning, still somewhere nearby, ready to act when the timing is right. The thought is chilling, and it's one I can't shake. I tell myself it's paranoia, but the memory of his deliberate movements, the low whisper of my name, and the shadow under the door makes it hard to believe that I was just lucky. I will never know the full story of who he was or why he chose me. And that is what haunts me the most, the uncertainty. The feeling that, even now, danger can be closer than I think, waiting in silence, patient and watching. Every hotel, every corridor, every quiet night brings back that same knot of fear. And I know one thing for certain. The night I spent in that room changed me forever. I will never truly feel safe again.